What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Johnny Mack here. Just wanted to give you a heads up that if you are looking for a community that is open to discussion as far as mentorship, conservation, the wild, becoming a better person, and all of that, there is a group for you on Facebook, and it is called Soul Seekers. Soul Seekers, we are all about making ourselves a better person. We're all about making sure hunting lasts for generations to come and encouraging people to get plugged in. Whether you are someone who has something to give or someone who needs to soak it up like a sponge, this is a community for you, and I strongly encourage you that if you're on Facebook to join Soul Seekers, and if you're not on Facebook, hop on there just for that group. It is only going to be as powerful as we all make it. And so just remember that life happens for you, it doesn't happen to you, and that you can't outgive good. You can't outgive good, people. I want you to understand that, and I want you to believe it, because when we believe that and we lead with courage and we lead with intention, lives are changed, lives are transformed, just like on this podcast, transformation through primal adventure. Be blessed. Enjoy this episode. Talk soon. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soulful Hunter Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack. Through this podcast, I'm on a mission to transform lives through primal adventure and to spread my mission of mentorship as conservation. This podcast is powered by Washington Backcountry, a resource for all hunters, both new and old. To find out more about Washington Backcountry, go to wabackcountry.com or search for Washington Backcountry on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The Soulful Hunter Podcast is also proudly presented by the Crazy Elk Company. Based out of the state of Washington with products made in America, they are providing solutions with gear to problems you didn't even know you had. Their tag wallet is one of those solutions, and I had the pleasure of using it on all of my hunts this last year, and it is now a mainstay in my kill kit. The tag wallet is a water-resistant zippered pouch that comes with its own reusable zip ties to safely and securely store your notch tag for quick and easy access. For more information, go to crazyelkcompany.com and use the code SOULFUL with a capital S to save 20% at checkout. Be blessed, everyone, and as always, stay soulful. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soulful Hunter Podcast. We're getting back onto our Thursday soulful episodes, and I got, once again, the great Tim Douglas of the Inspired Way podcast and him facing the storm, coming back to renew our soulful series and talking about not giving away our energy and focusing on what we can control, because we can't control what other people do, what other people say, what other people cause in this world. But what we do get to control is our mind, our heart, our response, and how we react or don't react to what's happening around us. And if you have been living under a rock, you might have not noticed that there are a lot of things going on in this world right now that are high anxiety, high stress, and causing people to take their eyes off of, well, if we go a biblical narrative, Peter on the water, taking their eyes off of Jesus, off of God, and putting them on the storm, and then they're starting to sink in the storm. And we always get to create our own existence, and so we get to create whatever's happening around us. Tim, thank you, brother, for joining me again for another episode, brother.
Hey, you bet.
How you doing?
Thank you for the invite back, man. This is good.
Oh, it's always great when we get together.
Yeah, but just to touch on what you were saying there, man, it is hard, and I know it's hard for a lot of people to understand or to identify controlling the controllables. And we do try to control so much, and I think unfortunately, we see it all around us. We see everybody trying to control something that they can't control, like whether it's an opinion, whether it's, whatever. And it's like, for instance, before recording, you and I were talking about, the situation that you're in and the state that you live versus the state that I live in, and the state where I was. It's like there's things that we can't control around us, and uh, it affects us in big ways. And so, how do we how do we manage that in the midst of it? We have some choices that we can do and control the things that we can't control. And so, we just have to slow down and identify like what are the things that are within my control.
Yes.
Period. And
Yes.
then stop there.
Yeah. Totally. And for those of you who are listening to this podcast and you're feeling the weight of the world on your shoulders, on your chest, the responsibilities of what the decisions that you're being faced with, I just first off want to tell you that it's going to be okay as long as you're following and staying true to your own existence and you're not following some fear-based narrative. You can do whatever you want. And no one's going to force you to do something against your own will. You've heard me say this before on the podcast that we always get what we want. Sometimes we don't even realize what we want, but yet we still follow it. And so if we want comfort and we're following fear, then we are following our fear to satiate whatever it is that is going to make us feel better. And what makes us feel better doesn't mean it's always good for us. And so I want to talk about not giving our power and energy away and, turn off the social media, turn off the news, get out into nature. You wouldn't even know something like this was going on in this world if you weren't connected to it. And so,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
everything is a transfer of energy. The sun, heat flows to cold. That's why they call it currency when we're talking about money, is that it's a current, it flows, it transfers, it moves, and then, we keep our money in banks, and banks are, if you think about the river and what's
Mm.
on the edges of rivers, and that's banks, and it keeps the currency flowing in one direction. What type of boundaries are you putting around yourself to protect your heart, your mind, your soul, your family? And at the end of the day, you
Mm.
can always get a new job. You can always get a new start. You cannot always just get a new life if you give away your sovereignty and your freedom. And Tim, what's your feeling on what's going on in the world and everything with this?
Yeah, man. I think it's a little crazy, but at the same time, I think it's, um, some things that you mentioned before I go there. You mentioned, being connected to social media or whatever. It's like right now, um, we're all disconnected. The entire world right now is completely disconnected from, uh, at least the Facebook apps, the Facebook world. So, as we're recording this, Facebook has gone down globally. And so all apps, including WhatsApp,
Instagram,
Instagram,
yeah.
Facebook, you name it, it's all gone. And I was just on a call prior to this one, and the guys were like, some of them were freaking out because all their businesses are on Facebook. And another one was like, I'm so glad that it is down. I'm not missing it at all. And so, to the point of, I've been trying to distance myself from at least Facebook, and following a lot of stuff. And I think that's the key, is where, part of what you were saying is, in managing energy and managing our time and our resources, our mind share, our energy, emotions, but is managing our thoughts, and we have the opportunity to chase thoughts. We have the opportunity to create new thoughts. We have the ability, as human beings, the only creatures on this planet to be able to do that, to have an imagination, to think what could be different, what could I be doing, what should I be doing, type things, instead of allowing ourselves to go down that negative path, because where negative thoughts go, negative emotions will flow as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where our energy and our will then starts to align with all of that. And so,
Well, and then
my take on Yeah.
just to add to that, because I think this is something that's very important, is that when we focus our energy towards that, or even if we're unintentional, is the things that we can manifest in our life because of it. That can come out of it.
Hmm.
Like, you're like, oh, I'm thinking on this, and something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. It's kind of like saving for a rainy day.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to get a rainy day because you've been saving for it, type thing. Is how I look at
Yeah.
it. Well,
Right.
I'm sorry to interrupt, man, but I thought,
No, no, no. It's absolutely right. It's like it's like what we fear most generally typically sometimes happens, and then there's times when it doesn't happen,
yeah,
and our energy was zapped, our motivation was gone. We had really no desire to do anything or go a certain direction because of this fear of what might be or whatever. And then none of that takes place.
hmm
I had a conversation with my father-in-law, who was a notorious worry wart. I mean, he would worry himself sick. And this is just months, probably weeks before his passing. He said, because he was living with us for about 16 months prior to he passed. And he's like, I've been watching you. And I have to say, I'm impressed with how you handle things, because I know you have things going on in your life,
hmm
like things as in not good things going on in your life. There's things that happen, but yet you continue to have this faith about you, and you don't talk negative about the situation. And he goes, I haven't heard you talk negative about it or even worry about it. You don't worry about anything. And he goes, that's been my downfall, is I've always been fearful or worried about what was going to happen. And I asked him, I said, how many of those things actually did come to pass? And he was like, very little, if any. And I said, and how sad is that to have, and he felt terrible. I wasn't trying to pour salt on his wounds, but he was opening up about it. But it's like, how terrible is that to live our lives worried and concerned about all these negative things, or the fear, buying into the fear mongering and all these other things, versus just living the way we know is true. And this is where I say, have a standard. you know if you have a standard on how you want to live your life, live by that. you
hmm
know and don't waver from that. When you waver from it, now we're giving into someone else's standard. And so I have a standard by which I live by. And I'm like, my wife asked me a very tough question. She was like, what if, we'll talk vaccines or shots, because I don't really believe that it is a true vaccine. It's
Well, it's not. It's
she's it
it's
isn't exactly. It's not. And so, but everybody calls it that. So I see that's how that works too. Right now,
uh-huh.
here but it's not. It's just a shot. And and so she asked me. She goes, what if you were asked to speak for Brendan Richard, or somebody else? She mentioned some other big name, and I was like, and they were going to pay you like a large sum, but you had to get vaccinated to go do that. And I said, wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
She goes, okay, what if that? She had some other crazy scenario that she knew that I really would love to do. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that.
yeah.
And I said, I wouldn't do that because now I'm going against my standard. My standard is I'm not going to get that,
Right.
period. I don't need that.
In the Bible, it
So,
says, "What does it profit a man's soul, or what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?" And it's not
and lose a
matter
soul.
and lose his
Exactly.
soul, which is so apropos to the Soulful Hunter and the Soulful series, is this idea that it's not that I'm saying that the jab is going to cause you to lose your soul. What I'm saying is that
Right.
what I'm backing you up and saying you have to know a standard and hold that standard. Don't
Yeah.
trade it for
Yeah.
this money system that.
Because here's the thing.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, here's the thing with that, real quick, as far as the soul and how we lose that, and what if I paint a picture of, I had a friend. He was a pastor. He took care of his body. He was a bodybuilder. Took care of his body really, really well. He was a pastor. He knew the word in and out. He was a great man. Took care of his spirit. However, he committed suicide. You think of our soul is our mind, our will, and our emotions. So his mind was lost. His mind was out there. His mind was negative thinking. I'm all alone. Nothing's loss of hope.
hmm
Right. So now the emotions follow that, and his will, the actions of what he does, lines up with all of those. And so that's his soul. And so, like, to the point of you said the jab just, doesn't mean that you've sold your soul. But at the same time, it's like, if my mind is like, I don't want to do this, and then I do it, and now I'm negatively beating myself up on it. The Bible also talks about no weapon formed against me shall prosper,
Yeah.
period. And the only way something, so I always said this about COVID, like, if I ever got that, virus, then does that mean it's prospering in my life because now I'm feeling the physiological effects of it, getting sick, runny nose, headache, all these other things?
Hmm.
Does that mean that it's prospering in my life? Absolutely not. The only way that it can prosper in my life, in the same way with this jab thing, the only way that it could prosper in your life is if it affects your mind, your will, and your emotions, and that is your soul. If I negatively, like, oh great, oh now I'm this, and now my emotions are all out of whack. I'm fear of it, and what's going to happen to me? Am I going to die now because I got this, or you know, every little thing, I'm questioning or whatever. Now my soul is out of alignment.
Right. And that's not good. So, regardless of what you choose to do with your
Yeah,
own life, staying in alignment with yourself
yeah,
is and with your what you believe in. So, for people that listen to this podcast that don't believe in a God or don't believe um, in any other way, you got to believe in yourself. Because if you don't believe in yourself, then really, what is the point, right? Like, why are you even existing in
yeah.
this world? So we set the standard and hold it. And then also know that you're not trapped. I think the biggest thing, I've had so many different conversations with people on social media. I had the pleasure of being on Greg Anderson's podcast, Endless Endeavors. And Greg was a police officer for the Port of Seattle that stood up against the lockdowns last year, and he got fired because of it. And so I was on his
Mm,
podcast, and I was sharing, and I was just like, you know, at the end of the day, you're not trapped. No one's forcing you to do anything, and there's
mhm.
always another option. If you're living in a state or in
Yeah.
a community that you feel majorly oppressed, move, get out. No one's keeping you there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
oh, I don't have
Yeah.
a skill set. I don't have this. I don't have that. Well, do you think, I'm teaching social studies now instead of physical education because I took an online teaching position. And it's ironic. Today I was teaching about Jamestown, the settlement in America, and how people came from Europe. And this is forgotten. People came from Europe under kings and princes and queens and princesses and dukes and bishops and all this royalty, and they were serfs. They didn't own their own stuff. They didn't live their own life. They were under the tyranny of an oppressive ruler, and they chose to come to a new world that was going to be difficult. And
Mm.
yet it was rewarding because they were able to do it for themselves. And I think that's lost in this soft society that wants instant gratification all the time. And I feel like we're starting over, like
Yeah.
get back to the root.
Mhm. They made the decision to go into the unknown,
Right,
which I think is interesting when you talk about that. It's like they didn't know what was ahead of them.
right.
They didn't know 100% what was going to happen or how they're going to restart. It was like, no, we just feel like it's something better over here. There's
Mhm.
that hope, right? So now I'm going to go over here and try to figure this thing out. And I think, if we, I've always, thankfully, I'm not in that situation where I have to make a decision. Um, Otherwise, I feel like I would make the decision, and it would be hard. It would be tough, but at the same time, I feel like I would be strong enough to make that decision to make the move to do something else. And I was thinking about this when you said that, is like, unless I feel like I have the influence and ability to start creating some change in my town, or my community.
Mhm.
If you have influence, then we should be using our influence.
Right.
And influence is simply role modeling a better way, role
Mhm.
modeling the way, or even it's teaching people how to think. And so if
Right.
you have the ability to do that, we should be doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this also goes along with community, right? Is that a lot of people are scared to be on their own. Well, you're only on your own if
Mm-hmm.
you don't allow yourself to build community. So wherever you go, you get to make
Yeah.
it whatever you want. And that can be different. Going back to this whole Jamestown settlement, and when they came to this country, this America, this North American continent, there wasn't roads, there wasn't infrastructure, there wasn't buildings, it was trees, it was wild, and they brought whatever supplies they had and they made their life and they owned it. And there's a lot to be said about that, about owning your own life and not surrendering your sovereignty and freedom to other people, a tyrannical government, any unconstitutional, not legal mandates, and going outside of what is a God-inspired declaration of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's wild times right now, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And that's one of the things I have do you mind if I have a actual training that I'm doing here coming up, and it's on this subject. Do you mind if I mention it real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about restoring the soul. And it's funny, I through you and I have had many conversations about the soul and just what it takes and things like that. And one of the things that I've learned over this, studying out the soul is that most of us will take care of a dented car. We take precious pride in our cars, or maybe it's our retirement portfolios or our homes, and we will restore those. We will fix those dents. We will fix those scratches. However, we don't fix those things inside of our
If you enjoyed
our
today's
soul.
podcast, I'd
And
love it
mainly
if
because
you
they're
could
hidden.
go ahead
We
and give
keep
this a
them. We
rating
keep
as
them
well
hidden.
as
We don't let
subscribe.
anybody know.
Also, you can
And I
check us
think
out
that's
on
what
Instagram
bothers us, or
under the
that's what
Soulful
affects
Hunter
us
Podcast.
when
Make sure to
stuff
tag
like
us some
right now is
pictures and
happening, when
posts,
COVID
and
hits, or
use the
whether it's
hashtag
whatever it is
Soulful
next,
Hunter.
right?
To
Whether
find
it's
out more
elections
about the
coming
Soulful
up, or
Hunter Podcast,
whatever
go
it
to
may be, these
soulfulhunter.com
mandates or
and be sure
whatnot.
to follow the
That's
podcast,
why our soul.
as
That's
we
why
are
we're
going to be
affected, is
bringing you a
because we have
lot of
dented
great
souls.
information,
And so it's
insight,
time
and
for us to
changing
really take
lives
care of
through
our
Primal
souls
Adventure.
and
I
replenish
look
those
forward to
things.
connecting with you on the next episode. Starts
Stay tuned.
on the inside
And
stay soulful.
It works
out. Inward reflection leads to outward direction. It doesn't matter what you are putting out as a facade to this world, or how good you look, or how you look to other people. If you're facing inner turmoil, take care of yourself. Take care of your mental health, your spiritual health, your emotional health. Do whatever you need to do, because you, and I'm speaking to all of you listeners, you are important. You are cherished. You are loved. You are needed in this world. Don't bow down and cower to someone else telling you what you have to do. Be in control and own your own life. Focus on what you can control, and don't give away your energy to things, people, places, or anything else that is going to continue this facade life, fake life that you have existed in, and own your life. And that is where you're not giving away your energy. Your energy will flow to where your intention is. And if you want a better life, focus on a better life. Focus on getting healthy mentally, spiritually, emotionally, socially, physically, intellectually, vocationally. I mean, how many of you don't enjoy your job? How many listeners hate their job? If you hate it, why are you in it? Go do something you love. If you don't know what you love, go try it out. And then there's this saying is like, oh, I got responsibilities to my wife or my children or all this other stuff. Yeah. And you're doing your wife, your children a disservice by being in an existence that you hate. Because it energy flows. And if you're hating your job, you're hating your life, you're hating where you're at, it shows, and it shows up in a bad way. And it's time to start taking ownership of that and not giving our energy away. You've experienced this. You've left areas, you've left jobs, you've gone and done different things, haven't you, in your life?
Oh gosh, yes. And it's not always easy, and I get it. It's not easy, but it is more freeing. There's situations where I've been a part of, and I've made the decision to go do this job or this career path, and it was a flop. And I'm like, okay, I've got to transition, and I've got to swallow the pride and the ego. Because here's the thing too, I just learned, I've been studying emotion, and ego is an emotion, is what I learned. And so, and not having that emotion, that to present myself better than what I am. And I think that's a lot of times is we're afraid to be seen, you know a certain way, and so the ego creeps up, which is an emotion that we feel, and so we give in to that, right?
Hmm.
Instead of just allowing that to go and then making the decision that we should be making, which is, hey, I need to make a change that's better for my family.
Yeah.
And I had a really good job in this one, and I was leaving for another, and a lot of the people could not understand it. But for me, I just felt like, hey, this is the best move for me and my family. And I had another gentleman come up and he goes, I know majority of the people in the office here don't necessarily agree with this move, but I understand it's for you and your family, and that's the best move that you could make. And so, to your point, it's like you're doing them a disservice by staying there disgruntled, because a lot of times we don't just leave that there. We do bring that home. We bring it home. We complain about our jobs. We complain about coworkers. We complain about all kinds of other things. And it's like the stuff we can't control,
Mm.
the stuff that now has our energy. And it's like, why don't you just start controlling what you can control? A, your thoughts, and B, learn a new skill. Do what you need to do to transition out. Don't be irresponsible. My son one time, he was like, Dad, I'm like, what's going on? He was like, oh, well, I just don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, that doesn't give you an excuse to be irresponsible either. You still have to be responsible and work and, pay your bills, do things like that while you figure it out. But you
Yeah.
can figure it out and move on to the next step.
Yeah.
So,
Here's an experience that I had this last Friday. I got off work and I got stung by a bee, and I had an anaphylactic shock response in my system, and apparently I'm allergic to bees now. But the biggest thing, and
that's
why,
crazy.
yeah, it's just so crazy. And this is how I'm tying this into not giving your energy away and focus on what you can control. I couldn't control that a bee stung me. I couldn't control that my body reacted the way it reacted. But the biggest thing when it comes to anaphylactic shock is that if your breathing becomes obstructed, you can die. If you can't, you don't have oxygen. And so what I did is, after taking Benadryl and calling 911, and I didn't have an EpiPen or anything like that, is I sat in a cold bath and I focused on my breathing. And no matter how hard it was and how crazy swelling my body got and the pressure in my chest and my lungs and my throat, I actually felt like I could have zenned out the entire time and
Mm,
stayed on my breathing, and I would have been okay. Now,
hmm.
I wasn't going to risk that. My wife and my children don't want me to do some science experiment and say, hey, try this out. We have modern medicine,
Right.
and I was able to uh, have an ambulance come, and I got my um, epinephrine, and I'm better. I'm better now. The issue is, though, is that how many times in our lives do we face a storm? To quote the great Tim
Mm.
Douglas, is how many times do we face a storm and challenge to go into it, run into it,
Mm,
to focus, no matter what type of storm is happening all around us, to close our eyes, take as deep of a breath as we can, and focus our energy and don't give our power away. Because if I would have panicked
mm.
and all of a sudden gone, and all of a sudden I'm breathing
Yeah.
crazy, and that just makes it worse.
Yeah.
Take a step
Yeah.
back and own your life. And I think that is something that is so often forgotten. And
Yeah.
that is just
So good.
a real life analogy of what I experienced this last week. And me then being like, okay, if that was me on the verge of death, potentially one of the closest times I've ever been to dying, I was still okay. So when it comes to people feeling like, well, I have to take the jab in order to keep my job or all this stuff, no, you don't. And it's not as bad as you think it is. And there's always a way out. And there's another way. And you do not have to give your power away. You do not have to give your energy away. And you get to focus on what you can control. And if you want it to be that way, then make it that way. And that was one of my biggest takeaways.
Yeah, there's something that I want to add to all this, and that is, which, by the way, I'm glad you're here today. I'm glad that things worked out, and
Thank you.
that you are here today, and we're able to share these stories and laugh about them and things. But um, something that one of my mentors, Jim Rohn, always says is allow people or you come to your own conclusions as to why you do something.
Yeah.
Don't just hear something and take it as gospel, or hear something and take it in and just do. No, come to your own conclusion as to why you are doing what you are doing. And to the point of, this here is that, it's FDA approved now. Well, I would say it's not. So do your research,
Right.
right? Come to your own conclusions as to whether it is or isn't.
It actually says they're in trials until
So
2023.
don't just hear something.
Yep.
Right. Don't just hear something and allow that to be the gospel or the thing that you truly believe. Same thing for scripture or Bible. Go look it up. Read it. Come to your own conclusions as to why you're choosing to make that your standard and move forward with it.
That's powerful. That's powerful. I love that.
Mm.
Any final words before we wrap this episode up? Because I know we wanted to keep this a little more on the shorter side.
No worries.
What I love is that you're talking about owning your own life. I asked my students. Actually, this is, I guess, I had a group of students that I coached in sports, and then I led in a Bible study. And it was during an election year with Obama, and I don't even remember who was running against him, maybe Mitt Romney or whatever. And I started to talk to one of my students, and a great person, about what do they stand for? Because this was outside of just a teacher relationship. I had community with these kids, these amazing individuals, and I talked to them, and I was like, well, why do you believe what you believe? Why do you vote the way you vote? Why do you do anything the way you do it?
Right.
And a lot of them are like, well, it's because that's what my parents did, or that's what I see my friends do. And that is going to lead you down a path that you're going to not be happy with. We have to identify our own core values and what we stand for and what we believe in and what we're willing to fight for and what hill we're willing to die on and what we're willing to truly stake our claim in. And if you never do the soul searching of your own life, you'll never be able to satisfy that either. And because of that, you're going to be, wherever the storm comes, this is where it's going to push you, rather than being grounded in the moment and in this life. So
so good, man.
Brother.
So good. And just the only thing that I would add is just, do own your life. Don't allow others to own it for you, because I think that's where we, regret or issues of that may come in. And it's like, no, just own it and accept that your decisions are your decisions. Yeah. And regardless of whatever they are, just own them. Like Jocko always says, extreme ownership. Just truly, totally own every decision that you make. Don't allow it to be someone else's decision for you.
Yeah. Don't point the finger at other people. Don't give your energy away.
Yeah.
Focus on what you can control. Yeah. I love it. All right, everybody. If you have not checked out Tim's podcast, The Inspired Way, you need to go do so. I highly recommend it. He is a great podcast host. As my dog is barking in the background, I apologize. Welcome to real life. Cool. See, I'm not giving my power away. I can only control what I can control. Anyways, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you were encouraged through this episode. I want you to be blessed. I want you to be filled with good spirit, love, hope, peace, gentleness, meekness, kindness, long-suffering, and know that life is happening for you. It's not happening to you. I'm Johnny Mack, Tim Douglas. Thank you for listening.
Yes.
As always, freedom on and stay soulful.